Among the many head-scratching moments of President Trump's 100-day media offensive, this one might stand out the most.
They said my campaign is most like my campaign and win was most like Andrew Jackson with his campaign. And I said, when was Andrew Jackson? It was 1828. That's a long time ago. That's Andrew Jackson. And he had a very, very mean and nasty campaign because they said this was the meanest and the nastiest. And unfortunately continues.
He's a fascinating...
I mean, had Andrew Jackson been a little bit later, you wouldn't have had the Civil War. He was a very tough person, but he had a big heart, and he was really angry that he saw what was happening with regard to the Civil War. He said, there's no reason for this. People don't realize, you know, the Civil War, you think about it, why? People don't ask that question. But why was there the Civil War? Why could that one not have been worked out?
For the record, Jackson's presidential term ended 24 years before the start of the Civil War. Jackson died 16 years before the start of the war. The nation's 7th president was a proud slave owner. People do, in fact, ask the question, why was there the Civil War? Most historians agree the cause was slavery, which it was. Joining me now, Jason Johnson, politics editor of The Root, journalism professor at Morgan State University, and former Congressman David Jolly, Republican of Florida. All right, Jason, I'm going to take, I mean, where to start? I guess the first position is just like, does it matter? He sort of screwed up the history. I think, to be honest, I think he read something about the nullification crisis of 1832, in which Jackson did sort of stand strong for the Union against actually an anonymous pamphlet written by his VP, John Calhoun, who's one of the great villains of that period, and got it garbled, so what's the big deal?
Yeah, Frederick Douglass must have told him the wrong thing when they were talking, because not a lot of people know all the great work he's doing. Look, to be honest with you, Chris, I'm less concerned about the fact that Donald Trump doesn't know basic 5th grade history than I am about the fact that he has such admiration for Andrew Jackson. I went and looked it up. If you look at the kinds of presidents that presidents admire, right? Nixon liked Abraham Lincoln. Ronald Reagan liked Calvin Coolidge. The fact that Trump admires a man who forced 100,000 Native Americans across the country, 15,000 died. He was responsible for the Trail of Tears. He was a proud slave owner. The fact that that's who Trump admires is a greater crime than him not realizing the guy was dead before the Civil War.
David, there's also something to me that is really key here, which is what the president knows and who teaches him new things he knows. Because it seems like a very powerful thing to be able to tell the president of the United States a new thing. Because you can see him process it and internalize it, and in that is great power. So the best example of this is, you know, him talking about the president of China, Xi Jinping, explaining North Korea to him, where he says, after listening for 10 minutes, I realized it's not so easy. I felt strongly they had tremendous power over North Korea, but it's not what you would think. If you get to explain something to the president first, you have a tremendous advantage.
Chris, I think you should ask for 5 minutes with the president. He might back off the AHCA, right? Listen, you ask, does it matter when he says these things? It does for 2 reasons. First, he's sober when he does that, right? It was pointed out at the White House Correspondents' dinner. He's sober. This is a sober president saying these things, but it also matters for this reason. When you lose credibility, you lose the benefit of the doubt. And he has lost his credibility. Look, when he intimates to April Ryan that perhaps all black journalists or all black people might know each other, when he refers to Elizabeth Warren in a racist term, when he talks about Frederick Douglass still alive, he talks about the Civil War, he has lost his credibility, and so he's lost the benefit of the doubt. It's why Billy Long in a district, Congressman Long, who Trump won that district by 40 points, today said, Mr. President, I don't believe you on pre-existing conditions. It's why his tax plan was greeted with a yawn. It's why the budget doesn't include border wall money, because McConnell doesn't think the president needs it. He's lost credibility.
That point about Long, David, is a really interesting one, because I am still working through how much it does matter what the president does and doesn't say. And what I'm hearing, what you're saying there is, that's where it matters, because you can't offer assurances to wavering members, we'll fix this in conference, or et cetera, the kinds of things where you could generally give a member your word, a member in your own party who's going to be disposed to believe you. You're saying that you think that has tangible effects for the ability to whip votes.
Of course, because what Billy Long said today is basically, Mr. President, I don't believe you. I don't trust you that you're actually going to resolve this. And so if a president loses his credibility on Capitol Hill, look, we're steps away from him losing his political agenda, his legislative agenda, and we know what that means for 18 and 20. I think you're going to see a primary against this president from the Republican Party in the next presidential election.
Well, Jason, this question about what, you know, everyone learning to understand the president often says things that are just sort of just speaking off the top of the dome. And what that means for the way that, I mean, you saw John Dickerson at the top of the show in that interview saying, well, I want to hear from you, the President of the United States. What effect do you think it has on the way we're used to understanding the dynamics of power in politics to have a president who will say things that everyone understands is essentially just trash talk?
Well, it's not just that it's just trash talk, right? That works for the Cavs tonight. But he's hostile, he's rude, he's dishonest. We know when he's being dishonest. But what it also says is this, and this is a problem if you're a member of Congress, if your international trade agreements have to be worked through. He seems like a president who is incredibly gullible, who will believe whatever it is that he sees. Look, I feel, Chris, that if you put the man in High Castle in front of him, he would think it was a documentary. We lost World War II.
No, but the point about the gullibility, David, is it's such a great point because at one level, right, the entire persona of this president is as a kind of hard-bitten cynic, that he's done the tough deals and he's been watching people get sold snake oil for so long. Finally, he's there. And then listen to this. This is President today saying he's willing to consider a gas tax hike to fund infrastructure. It's something I would certainly consider if we earmarked money toward the highways. Now listen to Sean Spicer explaining why, apparently out of nowhere, he said this. Take a listen.
He did not express support for it. He expressed that a group that had met with him expressed support with it and that he, out of respect, would consider their request. That's it. There was no endorsement of it or support for it. He was just relaying what another industry group had shared with him.
But this is the point. An industry group that has a specific agenda met with him, and the next thing you know, he's floating it, David. I mean, as a member of Congress even, not president, you get lobbied all the time. Part of the skill set you learn is basically filtering that information, understanding that people have an agenda.
Well, and you have to trust the consistency and the judgment of the people you're working with. And a Republican Congress now can't trust the president. You know, listen, what it comes down to, Carl Bernstein talked about this several times this weekend. We have a president who lies. And this is a tough job for folks like you, Chris, in the media. How much do you cover the lies? Because here's what's going to happen through the long lens of history. The president is going to be judged on what he does, and that's going to be a much harsher judgment, his policies, than actually lying. Because we've had presidents that lie, but he is weakening the presidency, and that's going to be a harsh judgment.
I continue to operate with the belief substance matters. I should say the president just tweeting, President Andrew Jackson, who died 16 years before the Civil War started, saw it coming and was angry. Would never let it happen. That's a tough counterfactual. I don't think there's a ton of evidence. A lot of people did try to work out compromises. None of them worked for a reason. Jason Johnson.
Chris, understand, he also said then Abraham Lincoln must have been a failure as a president if he didn't negotiate a better deal in the Civil War. That's also what he was doing when he made that comment.
Also true. Jason Johnson, David Jolly, thank you.
Thanks,
Good to be with you.